let's take a look at this snare drum. I forget what I did. Let's take a look. We got the snare top. So my default, I say 4 or 5 years ago, would be just replace it. Replace the kick, the snare automatically. Toms I almost never replace. It's rare. But the kick, the snare, it used to be my default. Let me just get on with it. I know these 2 or 3 kick drums that I can pull in and use, that I can, shape. But I felt like while that sounded good, especially for the click and the kick, like I mentioned, keeping that on top of the mix, I feel like I lose the dynamics, right? You lose the performance. And so I want to blend between the two. I want that sound, I don't know if you call it over-processed sound, but that hyper-real sound, the modern sound of the clarity that you get from using samples, but I don't want to lose all of the feel. And so I've really been doing better the last couple of years to include and blend samples. So include the live, the original recording, the best I can, and then go from there and blend samples to augment or enhance the sound. And so in this one, we've got a snare top mic that I do have in the mix. It's not maybe the most dominant sound you're going to hear, but let's take a listen and we'll see what we got going on. Let's bypass all processing. Here's what came to us. Let me turn off these couple of mics here so we don't, yeah, there we go. We'll turn this off. Okay, so we're getting some nice punch from that. We got a nice attack, and we're going to get rid of that ring a little bit with the gate because I'm going to feature that in another mic. But here, let's take a look at what we got going on here. I like the ghost notes. Drummers out there, you're safe to send me your tracks to mix because I make sure we get those ghost notes in the mix. I love the way that adds character to the track, and I use the snare bottom for that. You're going to see I'm going to choke the snare top, but fear not, we're going to get to the snare bottom where you're not going to miss out on those ghost notes. So we're just getting the hit, right? We got to turn this into a one-shot, essentially. And then I'm boosting a ton of top in the blend. I want to make sure that snare top is not just there for, we want to hear it. I want to mix it to sound good, and then we blend to enhance it from there. So we've got a gate. It's a super tight setting. We're boosting top in. I'm taking out a little bit, that boxy tone, kind of 700 hertz or so. And then we've got some fundamental probably in this next EQ. Let's take a look. Yeah, so we're boosting the fundamental, and I just more top in, right? So let's take a listen before and after this EQ. With it? Yeah. So a little more hi-fi. Now that snare is going to crack, cut through the mix a bit. But if I just boost the top, I'm a sucker for a fat snare. Now, I'm not saying this is a fat snare by any means, but I don't want to lose all the fundamental. And so by pulling that up, we retain some of the body of it and help it to sound pleasing to my ears, at least. I like a fat snare drum. Chunky. Like the chunky snares. Okay, let's look at the snare bottom. What's this snare? So we've got 2 snare samples in this one. This one is just for some ring. So here was similar to the kick drum where we featured a sample that just kind of added some air, some room sound to the tone. We're doing the same thing here. And what I've done to get that sample naturally has attack. I go into Slate's Trigger 2. I go into the curves, and I'll zoom in here. You can see this attack, sustain, and release. I'm backing off the attack so that we feature we get rid of the transient, essentially. We're getting rid of the thing we love about snare drums, right? That initial punch and that attack. I'm getting rid of it for this because I've already got attack that I want in the other samples and in the live snare. So this one, I'm just adding a little bit for that decay. Now, it sounds pretty boring, pretty ridiculous on its own, but let's play the snare top, and then we'll pull in and unmute this snare sample. With it. So, and now I can control how much or how little of that I want. I could automate it. Maybe there's a section where I need a little more liveliness from the snare drum. We can maybe pull that up. We can have some additional control. But I like that created a tail it's artificial, but it at least gives it a little bit more of a natural ring, instead of that kind of wallet snare drum recording sound, or duct tape in a wallet. So here's the snare bottom mic. I mentioned this in our test live stream. Something that I've done for a long time is I get on the snare bottom, I start EQing it and compressing it, saturating it, and all this stuff, trying to make this trashy snare bottom mic sound better, and it never does. It never works. It almost just makes the snare bottom sound more of this, what we hate about a snare bottom mic, or at least I hate. And so I finally got my head on my shoulders, and I just took all the processing off. JJP going on here, Jack Joseph Puig, just took all the processing off, and it just sounds better. It sounds the way it should. And then what I'll do is I'll automate that up when there's ghosting. I use this as my kind of ghost note track, and I'll pull that up. Now, it does contribute quite a bit more to the snare sound than I used to. I used to only use it for ghosts, and then I'd like automate it real quick down. I like a little bit of the snare bottom nowadays, but it's definitely what I'm going to add some of the ghosting. Let's see, there's probably some ghost notes right in here. And this is a work in progress. This mix is not done. So if you don't see anything I'm talking about with automation, it's not because I'm not going to do it. It's because I just haven't done it yet. So let's take a listen with this without the snare bottom and then with it. All right, and then here's, yeah, let's play it from that same section there. Okay, so that obviously is going to need to be automated, but for the time being, it's contributing. It's got a little bit more of the live feel into it, and yeah. So we're going to
the bottom snare has its own life.
It really does, man. It's got I almost want to look back.
Compress that and kill the dynamic on that. I understand.
Yeah, and you know, I found that that's the case in just about every genre too. I like a little bit of the snare bottom. Some genres you don't care as much about the ghost notes, I guess, maybe, but I don't know. For the most part, 90% of what I mix, I'm going in and featuring this thing.
Do you ever have a conflict with the two and the four? You know, with the actual snare hit? Because you're.
Yes. So there's a couple ways to treat that. It depends on the recording, but usually they're not doing anything too dangerous to the snare bottom mic in the recording. They're just sticking a mic down there and calling it, good. But sometimes if there's compression, certainly what I'll do is drum leveler, and I'll push down from sound radix.
Yeah.
I'll push down the snare bottom transient so that I only get the stuff I'm after, which is like the ghosting. And I mean, not to push it out of the way completely, but to push it down a little bit, similar to the kick bass side chaining kind of thing, so that I don't get too much of the snare bottom transient.
Yeah. So the 2 and the 4 doesn't get augmented.
Yeah, absolutely. So snare trigger down here. Let's see what we got going on in this one. The mixing gospel. There's a course. Check it out. Mixing gospel. I give these snare samples away in that. We've got, I'm telling you, man, this one, it sounds, I forgot about it. This is one of my snares. Something I recorded, something I blended and mixed, and I used to use early days of me mixing gospel. What I heard was slightly higher pitched, super tight, no reverb, no decay, and that was the sound. And it's what I used on LaRue Howard's project. I actually think the snare didn't come from there, but I used this sample. I had just recorded it, and then I ended up using it in her whole album years ago. But I tell you what, man, when I don't use this sample, I feel like I get my first note back for a gospel project is, man, sounds great, but not feeling the snare, or I hate the snare. I literally just did a mix for my man Kevin McFoy. I got your tracks coming your way too. I got his mix template. We went back and forth a few times because he didn't really care for the snare sound. He hated it. And then he messaged me and he gave me a little tip. He was like, hey, the snare I really like is the one you included in Mixing Gospel, the course that I have. And so I was like, well, let's go for that. I mean, why fight it? Let's put it in there. Let's see what happens. So I put this snare in, and Dave, the email back was just, he said, Dave, you did it. That's it. That's a snare. Let's go. Let's rock. And so this is, just about any gospel mix I'm doing, if it's going for that kind of gospel sound, that tight snare, this is the one that I'm going to be blending in or featuring. So let's see how much of it, all that talking, let's see how much of it is actually in the blend. I'll leave it out at first, and then we'll put it in. Yes. It's not in there too much. Let's hear this little section. Let me loop this this little guy right here. Oh yeah. That's our transient. I don't know if you guys heard that through the stream there, but that's our snare transient for sure. It does lose its life without that. So kind of reverse engineering my own mixes and realizing kind of subconsciously what I'm doing in the mix is kind of good for, we'll take that into future mixes. But that, I love the transient on that, and then I like the ring from the other snares going on. So I tell you what, next up, I mentioned it in the kick. Let's see how much of we're using on the snare here. The Kush AR1, about 15%. So still not quite as much for rock, for stuff where I'm going for impact and thwack and crack on the snare or the kick. This joker is cranked.
So the snare level is in parallel, correct?
Correct. So all those snare samples, I believe all of them. Let me double check. Yep, all of these snares, the snare top, the sample, both samples and the snare bottom are going to the snare level track where they're feeding into the Kush AR1. So you got a decent amount of energy now coming into this. Let's take a listen without it and then with it, the same little loop. Oh yeah, it brings out the life in it.
It just smooths that bad boy out.
Love it.
Great.
Would you level match it for a moment? Because I'm really curious to hear it.
Let's pull all the snares. So snare top through to this trigger. This sample here, let's hear it with it, and then we'll do a little level match. You know, I'm going to say I think it's quieter with the compressor on, but it's leveled out some of the transient and brought up the average level.
It's pushing down on the transient, that's why.
Yeah.
And that's why when I said earlier, it just sounds smoother because it's pushing it back.
Yeah, so I would almost say to level match this, if I pulled them in, I would almost be pulling the compressed version up to match the dry. But yeah, let's see. Maybe we pull this one up a little bit. Hey, you're not going to get a complaint out of me for pushing more snare drum. I'm to a fault. Drums and bass and vocals sit on top of the mix, and then Joey's got to smack me and say, hey, bro, where's the music?
We lost the music.
This is a little rabbit trail, but you know where that comes from? Is years of mixing overproduced tracks. And this is not overproduced, but my habit has become to be so careful pushing up because you get 2 pianos and 7 pads and all the different synths and bells and whistles and everything's got to be in, and it's like I want to hear it all. My instinct is gets claustrophobic, and so I want to be careful not to overwhelm the listener with too much music, and it's become a fault, a habit to have to remind myself, hey, you gotta get the keys up, man. Got to get the rest of that stuff in there. So hey, I turned off the link. Let me pull up the compressed version. Yeah, I tell you what, Kush, love this thing, man. So, well, we took a look at the snare. What are we doing for room mics? I'll leave you guys hanging. I'm not sure if I have. We've got a little bit of my close, far, large wooden room thing going on here. I don't know. Should we talk about that, or you guys want to move on? Let's let the live audience dictate. What are we doing here? You guys tell me. Let me know what you think. If we should,
let's give him the gusto. Show him. Show him the room.
Joey says, "Show him the room." I'm not even gonna wait. We're gonna show him the room. I trust you.
Yeah, show them the room. That's part of the whole deal.
So we've got Ocean Way because Joey in the live stream test said throw Ocean Way on it. So we got a little bit of Ocean Way. This guy here sucking the little bit of DSP I get with the Apollo Twin. It's probably all gone because of this guy, but you can see those settings there, blending some mid and some far. Let's see if it sounds good. I'll tell you what, we'll turn all the other stuff off until then. Let's pull open this Ocean Way. Oh, it's not going to let me move my... Oh, well.
No.
Here, we'll enhance it.
There you go. That sounds awesome.
I mean, you can hear pretty clearly that that sounds like a real drum session. You feel like it's something happening. You're in the control room listening to what's happening on the other side of the glass. I love that sound. Joey was the man to recommend it. And gotta have it. So that definitely added some life to it. Let's see what we processed. That's, I got a little compression on. And I'm not sure, what do we, about 3.5 for the ratio, 3.5, fast attack, fast release. Let parallel compression do its thing. Oh, it's not even parallel compression. We're just rocking it full on.
100.
Full throttle here. Let me get some tea real quick. And yeah, let's hear the compressor on and off. No. Needed the compress. That's a lot of compression.
The room is back.
The room is there. Hitting it hard. Fast attack, fast release brought it out for sure. Let's take a look. So what I've done for years is the Bricasti, I think it is, M7. Am I right, Joey?
Yep.
Okay, Bricasti has had Studio B Close, Far, and the Large Wooden Room are three that early in my mixing journey that I blended into and fell in love with the way that a little bit of each of those went. And found that, I forget the website. I used to have it on my blog. I'm sure it's still there. But dang it, I need to give you guys that link because I think they're still up. You can download the impulse responses from the Bricasti. Someone did a bunch of IRs and did it donation based, so you can toss them $5, $10, give them what you can, and you download those and then you can import them into. Back then it was TL Space that I had. Now they think they just call it Space, and now Slate in Verb Suite's Classic, if I remember correctly, has got partnered up with Bricasti and has those same IRs. So if you have the Slate bundle, which who doesn't, then you're going to be able to get these sounds. So the Studio B Close, the Studio B Far, and the Large Wooden Room are staples in my drum mixing.
Also, Liquisonics, Seventh Heaven.
Oh,
it is the Bricasti plugin.
That's insane, man. Yeah, that plugin's insane.
It's amazing.
It's got a price tag to it, but it's good stuff, man.
But Slate did a good job too.
Yeah, look at this. So you got Verb Suite Classics. I'm using
it's
it.
the same impulse responses.
From the
Slate got them, yeah.
because
Slate got them from Seventh Heaven, yeah.
Yeah, Liquisonics, yeah.
Right on, man. Well, look at that. There's a reason why they did that. I don't know if we want to talk about it today on the stream, but I remember there being some controversy there from another plugin company that did something that's we'll slap on the wrist. But hey, we'll leave that. We'll talk about that later. Hey, we're not afraid to get controversial. So we got the Verb Suite Classics. I'm using that to bring in the Studio Be Close, the Far, and the Large Wooden Room. So you can see those for those of you guys looking to emulate what we got going on here. I'm using a short room, medium room, and a long room, blending a little bit of each to the drums. Sometimes all the drums, sometimes a kick, the snare, the toms, the hat, everything gets it. Sometimes just the overheads I'll send it into, which it looks like that might be the case here. We're definitely sending some overheads to each of them. See, you can see there, I'm not a liar. And then we scroll up a little bit, and the snare has got some. Yep, so we got a little bit of the snare. So we'll turn those on here in a second. I don't think I used any for the kick. Yeah, no. It's rare that I do, but all right, cool. So taking a look at this snare, we've got our snare level. We're sending the snare into the close. Let's take a look at this one. I'll kind of boost it for for listening sake here, so you guys can hear what's going on. Cool. A little bit goes a long way. I would challenge you, pull this in, get you a drum kit going, download free multi-tracks at themixacademy.com and pull in some drums, send a little bit, set this up in your template. And then use the ones I've got there, the close, the far, the large wooden room, but then experiment with your own. See, you may like something completely different, but pull up until you start to feel the room impacting the drum kit. And then maybe back it off a little bit. Go to the far mic, pull up a little bit there as well, and then move on to the large wooden room. Pull that up, listen in context, and then listen to the drums and go bypass all three. I get asked all the time. People see me whizzing around Pro Tools. Control on Mac will allow you to, from wherever you're at. Let's show this a little. So if I want to click and turn on, I don't think I'm using that Snare Crush. If I want to turn off all the plugins or all the sends, you hold Control on Mac and you can click and it turns them all on or off from the position that you click. So if I wanted to leave Ocean Way in, but I wanted to turn these three off, I would click from there. Or if I just wanted the last two, there's a quick way to bypass it, and it works for your plugin inserts as well as the GUI spazzes there. Look at that. The M1 Mac having some issues. We may need to
do Shift A
look at that.
Bypass them all.
Yep, Shift A, and you get them all done. So, good looking out. So let's take a listen without any of these. Actually, we'll turn off Ocean Way as well. Oh! That hurt my heart. That was like, man, that's not how we hear a snare drum. We don't hear a snare drum like an SM57, placed right up against it. We hear the ambiance. And so, yeah, let's hear it dry one more time because that's painful. And then with our rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're jamming. So
the vibe is back.
So a little bit goes a long way, and I recommend pull these in. Get you a short-ish, medium, and a long room sound for your drums. Blend a little bit, and then bypass them. You're going to love it.